stellar flight exists, then that makes us a real, backwater of space.
Yes, it is, except here's the problem. We're going into space, aren't we? We have the space station. We're going to Mars with unmanned and eventually manned vehicles. We've landed on the moon. My uncle helped design the thing that landed on the moon with Neil Armstrong in it, the lunar module. What I tell people is that when we started going into space, combined with weapons of mass destruction, a red flag went over the earth that said we are at the point where this civilization could potentially be a problem. So I believe that we're viewed as a problem civilization that's in evolution. And the big task for humanity is to go from a fractured, kind of ape-like civilization where we're fighting each other over stupidity to a peaceful civilization that goes into space peacefully. When we reach that hallmark, that milestone, then you're going to see a much more open contact occur from these other civilizations and the human species.
Sophie and Co. on Radio Sputnik.
So according to your words, there is this special organization that keeps the lid on the UFO story. But surely aliens would not just stick to America. And if they're out there, other major governments of the world should have been aware of aliens too. So is there an international secrecy agreement, or each government has their own alien policy line?
It's a transnational organization. So let me make a distinction between international, something like the United Nations, and transnational. Transnational sort of transcends geopolitical boundaries. And for example, we have documents that show that the old KGB and Soviet USSR had cooperation with U.S. intelligence on this issue back in the darkest days of the Cold War. So in fact, secrecy on this issue has been maintained by a cooperative entity that is multinational and transnational for many decades. Now, the crown jewel of activity on this subject has been in the United States because of the technology and just, frankly, the macroeconomic clout that the United States possesses. But other countries have certainly had, we've had, for example, Chile and Brazilian military files have opened up recently where they have acknowledged chasing these objects with their jet fighters. We have footage that have been given to us from Chilean generals recently of these ET objects being chased by their jet fighters. In Mexico, we have similar footage. So a number of countries have actually cooperated with opening up their files. But the real research and development projects have been centered in the high-tech corridors in the United States and in very classified projects, which are properly known as unacknowledged special access projects, or a USAP. And there are corollaries to those in Canada and the United States, the United Kingdom, and I would presuppose to some extent in Russia and China, although to a lesser degree. Certainly countries all over the world have a prevailing interest in having this information come out because the big talk is about climate change, so-called global warming, and resource depletion. The fact of the matter is the technologies for going from one star system to another involves very advanced science and physics that would get us off of oil, gas, and coal very quickly. But therein lies the problem. It's the first thing a scientist is going to say to any government official is, what technology are they using to get here? When they ask that question, it will be answered. When it's answered, it's the end of oil.
So we're going to talk about oil in the second part of our program. We're going to take a short break right now. We'll be back with Dr. Stephen Greer, director of the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence, discussing our prospects of finding alien life forms anytime soon. Stay with us. The dust. Is this whole UFO thing really in a normal world?
No, it's just an acknowledgement that the world is a faint shadow of what it could be if the technologies that were developed over the last 50 years in classified projects were being used. We're all using jets and cars, using oil and gas, and we don't need them. We haven't needed them for decades. It's a decision that's been made because to bring out these new technologies would be too disruptive to the current macroeconomic system. And I think this is a debate that needs to be joined because increasingly people are concerned about the climate change and pollution and deaths related to air pollution. These are all solvable problems, so they're not going to be solved by tinkering around the edges with solar power or wind power. We need really bold new scientific discoveries that have been studied for many decades and classified projects brought forward to benefit the human species.
So one of your main theories you're saying earlier is that the powers that be don't want the public to know because of oil revenues. Alien technology would kill oil business, but some governments like oil revenues and then others don't. For instance, China would be very happy if it didn't have to buy oil. So it can't all be about that, can it?
It's about the macroeconomic system that is dependent on the petrodollar system. And that's from Bretton Woods at the end of World War II, if you look at history. So it's not just even countries that are not oil net exporters, for example, like China or Japan. They're tied into a macroeconomic system that is very dependent on the current energy and industrial paradigm, in particular the petrodollar. So these are things that would change very quickly with the disclosure of the fact that we're not alone in the universe, and we've been studying and have figured out how these machines operate. Let's be very frank. They're not using Exxon Jet A fuel or Russian oil or Saudi oil to go from one star system to another. This is common sense. And the people I've spoken to in the research and development world in classified projects, and as I mentioned, we have over 900 of these top secret whistleblowers on our team. It's quite clear that these technologies have been fully developed, but bringing them out would disrupt the status quo. And so big economic interests all over the world would have to adapt very quickly to a whole new economic system.
Sophie and Co. on Radio Sputnik.
So you also say that American president is not being told about all such findings. You even prepared a special briefing for President Obama, and you spoke before Congress. How did it go?
Well, you know, what I found is everyone wants to know. I'm in Washington right now about this issue. This is the biggest non-secret there ever was. Everyone knows this is going on. All the way back to when I was first putting the briefing together for President Clinton and his CIA director, it was well known that there are deep secrets on this issue, but for the most part, the elected officials, at least in this country, aren't given control over those projects. If you doubt this, go remember what Jimmy Carter said after he became president when he tried to look into this. And President Carter said that when someone asked what it's like being the most powerful man in the world, he said, I wasn't that man, because there were things that they would not tell me about and I had no control over. So this is a really big problem for democracy and for governance all over the world, this level of secrecy. And it's reached the point, at least in the United States, the United Kingdom, and a number of other countries, where the secrecy is in of itself criminal. I'm saying this very specifically, and has subverted the Constitution and the rule of law and proper oversight. And this is what we found with the President Obama and with Clinton. Also, if you look all the way back to the time of Eisenhower, he got very frustrated dealing with this issue, and this is why he made the famous speech, "Beware the military-industrial complex." He was a general. He was not anti-military, nor am I. I'm from a military family. However, there are interests that have become very undemocratic and have been a threat to world freedom and also now to our geophysical existence in terms of the biosphere that have been allowed to go on for way too long. And this has been a problem all the way back to President Eisenhower in this country and similarly in other countries around the world, this level of secrecy.
All right, so tell me this. If this story is kept so secret that even presidents aren't informed about the issue, Why are you still alive? I mean, why are you allowed to make documentaries that stream on Netflix? The CIA has killed people for way less than disclosing a huge government cover-up.
Yeah, and there are 3 people on my team who have been assassinated who have been helping me, including a former CIA director. I don't want to go into that right now. However, we have systems in place to protect what we're doing. I have a lot of information that if something happened to me that would hit the internet, that would be catastrophic for those folks. So that's just something we put in place about 20 years ago. And it's something that my view of it is there are, and this is the other thing, there are people at the Pentagon and CIA I've dealt with who are very much in favor of disclosing this information. So this is not a monolithic us versus them. There's a huge number of people who are on the side of bringing this out all over the world. I have a friend of mine, Carol Rosin, who's worked very closely with senior Russian contacts who want to see this disclosed for the same reasons we do. So, and we have similar people in China, in the United Kingdom, and Canada. I don't think that it's a monolithic issue. I think it's very much in flux. What I'm seeing is that it isn't going to happen until the people become aware that this is a serious problem, but it also has within it serious solutions for the world's environmental and governance issues and economic problems around the world.
Sophie and Co. on Radio Sputnik.
You know, there have been higher-ranking military and government officials coming forward talking about aliens for about 60 years. I spoke personally to a former defense minister of Canada who told me that there are dozens of alien species.
Oh, yes, he's a friend of mine.
Right. So he told me there are a lot of species, alien species visiting the planet. And none of them were able to provide hard, undisputable evidence. But I just wonder, like, how many witnesses there needs to be. I mean, does it really take an alien saucer landing on Red Square or Pentagon for everybody to acknowledge the existence of outer civilizations?
No, it doesn't take that. However, it does take the people to get educated on this in a way that's meaningful, which is why we're putting out these educational films and products. I think that Paul Hellyer, the Minister of Defense of Canada, a very good friend of mine, he and I held a press conference in Toronto, and I was one of the early people to introduce him to this subject. And he knows for a fact that he was being kept in the dark as Minister of Defense of Canada. I have dealt with the Minister of Defense of Great Britain, Lord Hill Norton, who was a 5-star admiral, who also was being lied to about these projects. Now, in terms of hard evidence, we have them. I have radar cases and I have traces of the actual physical material. We have, you know, when you say that we don't have the physical material and evidence, we do. But who's looking at it? Who's exposing it? Like, there should be a series of shows that does nothing but put that forward. That's what we've started to do, because those exist. Not just government documents and testimony, but physical evidence, such as the radar tracings. And recently, the Pentagon released a radar case off the coast of California, where one of our fighter jets tracked one of these objects moving in a way that no conventional aircraft could possibly move. And this was in the New York Times and CNN and elsewhere. My point is that there's a huge amount of evidence like this, and even physical hard evidence, and we have it. I've been accumulating it for decades. The question is, who's going to do a story on this? Because ultimately, what happens is that, at least in the United States, if you start doing a deep dive into the evidence on this, that show is going to get canceled. Everyone thinks we have a free press in America. We do not. We have a managed press. And if CNN started drilling down on this subject, they would be told to stand down off of it. And I've seen it happen. ABC News was pursuing this with us. I gave them 35 hours of digital tape of top secret testimony and hard evidence, and the executive producer of ABC News was told, you will not be allowed to do this story. So there's a myth around the world that the media is somehow completely free. The big media and mainstream media is free to do this, and that is not the case. If you look at the documentary Unacknowledged, we have an Air Force intelligence official who said, we used to bring from the U.S. bags of cash to people in the media to secure their cooperation in keeping this stuff secret. Now, this is a fact. This guy's testimony is there for anyone to see. And he was with many years in a classified project at a Kirkland Air Force Base, managing counterintelligence and trying to stop leaks on this issue. So these facts are out there for the public to see now. I hope people will look at it. And I think that people need to understand that we need to create a new type of media that actually is honest and will tell the truth to the public about this.
All right, Dr. Greer, thanks a lot for this insight and the interview. We were talking to Dr. Stephen Greer, director of the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence, talking about alien civilizations and our prospects to get in contact with them anytime soon. That's it for this edition of Sophie & Co. I'll see you next time.